All right. Big hello. How are we all? Good to see everyone. Lots of people already in the chat. Turns out when you offer to answer any questions that people have, people show up. So that's always a good thing, I guess. So for those who don't know me and have just kind of wandered along here for no particular reason, I am Chris, also known as the Atheist Pastor. You may be listening to this on one of the many channels we now podcast to, or watching on YouTube, or you could be Jay and Jeff, who are actually here live with me, or even Ozman in the background. So, yeah, so how are we? How are we all? What's going on? Jay, what are you doing, mate? What's going on?
I'm good, man. How about yourself? You're doing all right?
I'm always good. Always good. It's I'm glad to have you here. Jay's the voice of reason. He's going to be, I guess, any questions that there are, he'll be throwing the questions out there. So Jay's going to keep an eye on the chat. So if you've got a question for me, just tag Jay in it. So it's at the Nevermore Tavern. You'll see it going down there. Just look at the scrolling text, and you will, the questions will come out. So I know there's a few people who have been looking forward to this. Gary Priestley, I'm looking at you. I know that you've got probably a page full of questions ready to go. So I'm looking forward to them. Scummer, Jeff, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, Chris. Thanks for asking. Actually should be getting back to work finally next week, and in fact, she finally managed to go out for a nice long walk for the first time in months yesterday. So, yeah, feeling a bit better.
Sensational. Well, that's good, mate. All right, so a couple of things. Actually, I'm going to throw out an announcement. So I've been having some conversations this afternoon, this evening, and on Monday, I have lined up an interview. So it'll be 9:30 Monday, which is basically the time, wherever you are in the world, the time it is now on Monday. John Richards is coming on for a chat. I'm going to be having a chat with John Richards. I'm looking forward to it, actually. It should be... He seems like an interesting and polarizing character. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation, seeing what he's got to say. And so I just noticed there's something in the chat that I'm going to pick up. Gary Priestley has just said, at the Nevermore Tavern, you rock. No, he's not a rock because he's not an atheist. Just going to get that out there right now. All right. So cool. So people, whatever you want to ask, let's go ahead and ask. Look, I've got Jeff. You're here now. I'm going to give you the first question. What do you want to know?
Yeah. Well, okay. Because it's no worries. Because obviously, obviously, you and I are very different ends of the spectrum politically. But I guess the one thing I'd like to ask you is that since have your politics shifted in any way sort of since you've become an atheist? That would be an interesting way to start, I think.
Maybe on some of the social issues, but that's probably it. As far as where I'd sit on the political spectrum, no, I always have been a conservative. Always consider myself as a conservative, certainly as an adult. Look, the way I approach things, I guess, my view on scripture in schools, stuff like that has probably changed. Same-sex marriage I was fine with. Maybe if we go back 15 years, it would have been a different discussion. But as I was sort of coming out of religion, towards the end of my religious journey, I guess you could say, a lot of my views had already kind of, I think, just matured. I think it just naturally matured. Whether that was anything to do with religion or atheism, I'm not too sure. But no, it's I've probably, if anything, I've become firmer, especially on economic conservatism, since becoming an atheist. But I think that's also part and part with it's sort of where I'm at in life.
Okay, that's cool.
So we got a question from the chat already.
Beautiful. Bring it on.
Ed wants to know, what is Chris thinking of the orange idiot Lily?
Well, I don't think he's an idiot for a start. I know that's going to be an unpopular thing. Look, love him or hate him, he's not an idiot. You don't get to his level of success and become the president of the United States if you're a dope. as far as what I think he's a populist. I think he's an old school salesman. I think he knows how to play to his particular demographic and his particular crowd. I've got the shits with something he said the other day about COVID in Australia, where he was a mile off. Which I'm actually going to rant about. I was going to rant about that tonight, but I'm actually saving it for Over and Under with Steve. Look, I think the whole orange man bad thing, and I've said it a few times, it's like the little boy who cried wolf. I think people just keep crying wolf so many times that when Trump does do something wrong, and he does plenty wrong, I mean, he's a typical politician. I think the people who probably shouldn't ignore it do ignore it, because it's just they keep hearing, orange man bad. But yeah, no, it's, I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not a Trump hater. I'm agnostic on him.
Okay, so we got another question. This is from Gary. Since definitions can be
good.
Since definitions can be personal, how do you define your conservatism?
Ooh, okay. That's a bloody good question. How do I define my conservatism? Okay, so my conservatism is more aligned economically. So I'm an economic conservative and a social liberal. So that's probably where I define myself. I guess my values are smaller government, less government interference. I'm pro-business, but where it's responsible business. I'm not for monopolies, anything like that. But I'm a believer that that businesses are the best way, successful businesses in a country, the best way for the entire country to sort of move ahead, because they provide jobs, they provide, which then provides additional income for people to spend in the economy. I'm a big believer in trickle-down economics, which it's, some people will say is bullshit. Some people say it's wonderful. The reality is that was initially implemented in the 80s, and we don't really have any proper data on it yet. But to me, it makes sense. So that's probably where, I guess, if I were to define my conservatism. But as far as where I sit on the left-right plane, I'm not a big believer so much in the left-right dynamic. To throw to history really quickly, so left and right wing, where that comes from, because most people don't realize this, it's comes from France when the French Revolution was happening. So those who wanted to get rid of the king and wanted social change sat on the left, and those who wanted for the king to stay, possibly with some changes, but wanted to keep the king in power, sat on the right. And that's sort of where initially the left-right dynamic sort of sat. And I don't necessarily think that's valid in modern political society, because it's just so different. I think, like Gary said, politics is personal, and I think people's understanding of politics is personal. I've had some great conversations with people where they'll consider someone to be moderately left, centre left, or even possibly right wing, and I'll say, well, actually I think they're a far left, and I guess definitions and understandings are something that are still being debated by academics. I sat with, for an Australian example, I sat in a politics lecture. Now, I'll preface this by saying that this particular lecturer famously walked into a lecture the day Maggie Thatcher died, going "Ding dong, the witch is dead," and I don't think he could get the smile off his face. So he certainly has a side of politics. But he said the Greens, so which probably the furthest left, well, they are the furthest left mainstream party. He said they were probably to the right of the political spectrum. And when he sort of said that, I'm just like, hang on, this is an academic who's saying that. And then I've heard people who have said that, Malcolm Turnbull, who was a Liberal Prime Minister, which is the right-wing party in Australia, he was to the left. So, I mean, it's really, I don't think anyone knows what's left and right anymore. But as far as being a long answer for how I define my conservatism, that's probably it. If you need any more clarifications, though, hit me up.
All right, we actually got 3 questions now.
Ooh, boom, can come.
So we'll start with the first one. This is from Steve. He said, "Do Aussie politics have riders, which basically are, if you give my constituents money, I will vote for you, Bill?"
Yeah. like as in, oh, yeah, there's deals, especially in the Senate. Okay, so we've got the House of Representatives, which is equal representation. So there's 151 seats. It's basically divided off the population, about 100,000 to a seat roughly, and then each of the states has 12 senators. Now, in some states like Tasmania, that's got a population of just under 500,000, when compared to New South Wales, which has got a population of 7.5 to 8 million. There's obviously a bit of a disparity. So what you'll see some more unique senators get elected in places like Tasmania and Queensland. They hold a balance of power, I guess. So what will happen is, in order to get legislation passed, they'll insist on a few things and do that. When we've had a hung parliament, not hung parliament, a minority government, we had that in 2010, where what had happened was basically the Liberal Party and the Labor Party kind of had about the same number each, and then you had these 4 independents who basically sat in the middle and kind of whatever they wanted, because they determined who was in government, whatever they wanted, they pretty much got, and in their electorates got very well looked after.
Okay. So,
but it's a shit system, but it's the best one we've got.
All right. Gary Priestley again. If you are socially progressive but economically conservative, what happens when these conflict? I.e., spending money.
I'm not socially progressive. I'm socially liberal. So, it depends on the individual issue. I believe that business can get involved in situations sometimes for the better. I think in areas where you've got, for instance, say we've got an area where we've got high unemployment. What I'd say is, well, instead of the government throwing more money at people, why don't we encourage businesses to employ people, give them skills? So that the business might get the employee at a cheaper wage. I guess almost like an apprenticeship or something like that. Gives the person who's unemployed a job, gives them the skills they need, gives them more money than they get on unemployment, which then allows them to spend more money in the economy and ultimately creates more jobs. So I think that a lot of social issues can be tackled in a conservative way.
Okay. Next one, Godless Granny. What are your thoughts on a living minimum wage?
It would depend what that is. If we're looking at the Finnish model, no, I don't think that's a good model. I've got no issues with unemployment benefits, or even student benefits. I think that's fine. I think that you can't have people starving on the street, but at the same time, you don't want to make it so high as it discourages people from getting a job. You don't want someone to sit back and think, well, I can sit here and get X amount per week for doing nothing, or I can go and work 40 hours. It's only going to be worth another $50 to me, or another $100 to me. I think it's got to. There does need to be a reasonable difference between a minimum working wage and a minimum living wage. I also think that you've got to look at people's circumstances. So where you've got people who have got disabilities, or there's circumstances that prevent them from being able to get employment, I think that we need to look at options there. I think we've got to have a bit of common sense about things. But no, I wouldn't have a minimum, like just a wage that everyone gets, like the Finnish model, where I think everyone just gets a certain amount of money regardless.
Can I actually ask just a clarifying question? What
Sure.
Maybe Granny can quote. By living minimum wage, is she talking about employment wages or universal basic income? I just need to clarify that.
I thought she was talking about the universal income. If that's what I've answered to.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So if I'm wrong there,
I was wondering if that was what she was asking. I just wanted to, if she could clarify that.
Yeah. Now, I was just going to say, Jay, there's a few questions that I'm noticing are coming through with me tagged in them. So just anyone who does have a question for me, make sure you tag Jay Nevermore Tavern in it. But I know there's a question from Master Zenith and one from Amanda. Hey, Amanda, who have got.
I don't see the one from Zenith though.
It's above. So Granny's question. It's actually there's one above Granny's question and one. So Zenith's above Granny's question.
The only thing I got from Zenith is we're still under the Queen.
Oh, I took that as a question. Oh, okay. I was wondering. I thought that might have been a question about whether we should be a monarchy or a republic. I'll answer that one anyway. I'm a Republican when it comes to that. I think that I don't think we need the British royal family anymore.
Well, look at that. Look at that. I'm on the left, Chris is on the right, and we found a point of agreement.
Yeah, I know, isn't it shocking? Heaven forbid.
Yeah, sorry, Zenith, if you had a different question, I'm not seeing it pop up. So if you want to tag me in it again, and I'll get it to him as soon as I see it.
Cool. So I think there's Amanda's question.
Yeah, Amanda's next. How do you feel about the fact that the only climate deniers seem to come from the right, including your PM?
Okay, so our PM isn't a climate denier. In fact, the Australian government under Scott Morrison has actually had the largest investment in renewable technology that we've ever had. We had $11 billion invested in renewable technology last year out of a $500 billion GDP. So there's a ton of money going into it. Under Morrison's government, we've got Snowy Hydro 2, which is hydro power plants that are being built as we speak. If you've been told that Scott Morrison, who's our Prime Minister, is a climate denier, then you've been fed false information. He is absolutely not a climate denier, and the Liberal Party policies don't reflect that. There are climate deniers who do sit on the right. In fact, there's a climate denier who is in the seat next to the one I'm in. I'll be honest, it pisses me off because it's stupidity as far as I'm concerned. It's pretty clear that there is that climate change is happening. It's pretty clear that there's man-made reasons. I think we do have a problem on both sides of politics where you've got two extreme points of view. You've got one extreme point of view that says there's nothing wrong, nothing to see here. There is no climate change, and then you've got the other point of view that says that the world's going to end in 5 years, which just then fuels the climate change deniers' argument. So I think there's a sensible ground that's based in fact that most people adhere to. I don't think necessarily climate change policy is popular when it comes to right-wing politics. I think it's it's probably a bigger focus on the left because it's a more popular left-wing sort of policy. But it's, in Australia, our right-wing government's invested more in renewable technology than was ever invested by any other government in the countries. And that's not just as a number, that's as a percentage of GDP.
I'll just say something on this. And this is, I have to stress, this is only relating to the British left and some of their history on climate change. They've got a lot better on, they're way better on this, but this was actually an issue that the left in Britain was very, very slow to embrace. This could have been, you could argue that a lot of this was in the 80s where there was still a bit of a debate around this, but I think one of the reasons that the Greens were formed was the fact that a lot of the traditional British left, like the Labour Party, and particularly a lot of the trade unions, were very slow to recognise this, or sort of were, because I think there was also the kind of schools of thought about how you deal with climate change, and
because it was especially in a lot of the coal mining areas. We had the same in Australia. That's why the Greens were formed. It was because the Greens actually formed in Australia out of Tasmania, and it was in protest to the logging of Tasmanian forests, which the unions, were pro. And look, even in Australia now, in the Labor Party here. They had mixed attitudes on the Adani coal mine up in Queensland. So, they thought that, there was, I guess, the Melbourne school of thought, which is, I guess, that inner city sort of green, lefty, they were against the coal mine, but then the rural, I guess, not rural, but up in Queensland, where there was going to impact jobs and things like that, they were and very pro, and even the a lot of the union areas were very pro the coal mines. So there's a split on the left when it comes to a lot of this stuff. So it's not necessarily a left-right issue, I think, but
I would say and again, I can only speak for really the left in the UK, and my experience is that it's the attitude has hugely changed over the years. And I've actually shown this a couple of times. I've really ought to send a copy of this to Manda or something, but this was something that was very much endorsed by the TUC about creating jobs around climate change. And it was something the campaign against climate change that wrote this, but it was very much backed by the trade unions Congress in the UK. So there's definitely been a much needed shift from the British left over the last 20 years or so on this.
Cool.
Yep.
So,
all right. So
I will just say before we go off this that I do see where Manda's coming from, because it does seem a lot of the time now that it is coming from the right. I don't know if it's exclusively.
It's extreme elements.
Yeah,
it's extreme elements. I mean, there's plenty on the left that the communists are pretty renowned for their factories, and China, which is the I don't think anyone could deny as a left-wing nation, is one of the biggest pollution emitters in the world.
I could debate that with you, Chris, but yeah.
Well, we don't want to get stuck on one topic too many, because we got lots of questions. So.
Now, incidentally, I am seeing a lot of questions coming through that haven't tagged. So just if you are tagging, make sure you tag Jay, which is at the Nevermore Tavern.
Yeah.
But I know, Jay, you keep an eye on these things, and you're really good with it. So
yeah. So all I do have two follow-ups from Granny's question from Granny. Mm-hmm. She says just the lowest income that can pay, not the universal. Like in the U.S., some wages are so low people can't survive on them. In Seattle, you need $28 an hour to have any housing. So yeah,
yes. There should be a reasonable minimum wage. Look, Australia's got the highest minimum wage in the world, so I think you've got to be reasonable. I think you don't want to make it so high that businesses won't employ people. And I'll give you an example of that. I had a retail shop, and my retail shop, I wouldn't employ people to work on a Sunday because it cost me too much. We have to pay double time in Australia on a Sunday, which on a casual wage equated to around about $44 per hour. Plus then I've got to pay 9.5% superannuation on top of that. So it'd end up costing me around about, by the time all is said and done, it's around about a $50 an hour cost per person. So rather than giving my staff shifts, which I would have if it had been at the regular rate, I just either closed a shop or went in and worked myself.
Yeah.
So I think there's got to be some sensibility with it. And you know what? My staff would have loved the extra hours. It just made no sense to pay them a rate that was so high that I couldn't make any profit.
So next question from the grumpy old dude. Should we be allowed to have a lottery once a year to choose someone to throat punch people who screw up?
I think that's something that I think Ed's actually volunteering for that. It's just pretty clear. Ed, I wouldn't have the lottery. I'd just let you do it, mate. We'll just get you in for that. So, yeah.
From Gary.
I was just to say we could do the thing that ancient Athens did, where once a year they'd have a vote on whether on someone to ostracize. So we could always do that.
So Gary Priestley again, do you believe in trickle-down economics?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I do.
All right.
Look, it hasn't been proven either way. To me, it's common sense. Yeah.
All right. Master Zenith again. I just had it. Where'd it go? Lost it again. He said, okay, should we become a free monarchy?
No, we should become a republic.
Okay.
Yeah, look. It's. I don't think modern Australia needs to have. Yes, we're part of the Commonwealth. We have a somewhat of a British heritage. And obviously that there were people here before the British got here, but I guess the society we live in now is based on the British society. Whether we like it or not, that's just the reality. No, look, I think that Australia should have its own head of state. The fact that our head of state is, even though it's appointed by the Australian government, it just makes no sense to me. I've got no problems with basically keeping the same system we've got, but replacing the Governor General with an elected president. I think that's a common sense one to me. And look, I like the Queen. I've got no problems with the royal family. I don't dislike them. I don't think they're nasty, evil people. It's one of her sons I've probably got a bit of an issue with. We don't need rule from England. We can rule ourselves fine, I think.
All right, moving on. Beryl Steindl asks political or personal thoughts on Pauline H. and also Clive Palmer.
All right, I could do a whole episode on those. Okay, I'll start with Pauline. Pauline is a lot smarter than people give her credit for. To meet her in person, she's actually a very nice person. Her politics, I think, are populist politics. I think she knows what to grab onto. I mean, look, her main voter base, well, obviously, I mean, she's a Queensland senator. Her main voter base is probably more rural Queensland, which is probably more that it's probably the least multicultural part of the country. I joked with a friend of mine that the people who are afraid of the Muslims coming to get them are the people in the state with no Muslims. So that kind of sums up my thoughts on Pauline, I guess. But look, as a person, I mean, I've met her a couple of times. She seems nice. Clive Palmer. Okay, so I know Clive. I've met Clive. I've had a lot to do with Clive Palmer. I stood as a candidate for his political party in 2013, something I deeply, deeply, deeply regret. When he first came on the scene, what appealed to me about Clive was I thought he was a bit of an alternative. I think we had a bad government in the Labor-Gillard government, and that's not a slight on Gillard. I think she could have been a much better prime minister than she was given the opportunity to be, but she was held up by a minority government with a few people sort of pulling the strings out of Port Macquarie and Tamworth. And I wasn't particularly impressed with Tony Abbott at the time. So I'd had a fair bit to do politically. I was still very religious at that point. And Clive actually called me and asked me if I wanted to run, and I did. Clive's a charlatan. He's an absolute charlatan who, in my opinion, is only in it for himself. He thought that he saw an opportunity where he could potentially hold the balance of power in the Senate, which is what he was after. And you know what? It's fortunately that didn't end up happening. I think it sort of tells you everything about him, that every senator he had, apart from one who was the guy who worked for him in WA, left. So now Clive, look, I think that he certainly, his advertising probably went a long way to helping the Liberal Party win the last election. So I guess, I'm happy about that. I don't think it necessarily finalised the result. It may have been the difference in, between us having a majority and a minority government. I think Morrison would still be Prime Minister regardless. No, I think Clive is a con man as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't buy anything off the guy.
All right. So next one from Gary again. How do you measure the success or failure of a conservative government?
How long's a piece of string? The same way you measure the success or failure of any government, I think. I think history is probably the better way to look at the success or failure of any government. I think at the time, there's a lot of things that will get put up that one side will say is good, one side will say is bad, and then it's all determined later. I think Howard, I think his government was a very good government. I think history has shown that. We had huge economic growth. And I think at the same time, a lot of that was also off the back of a very good Hawke Keating government. I think they were the best Labor government the country's ever had. Even Keating's still an interesting guy now. He was out in the paper today, had a few things to say. He still likes to poke and prod people. I don't think the Fraser government was particularly successful. I don't necessarily think the Whitlam government was overly successful. I think they had a few good reforms. But I think it's hard to measure. But I guess history is the ultimate thing. But then at the same time, personal political preference will always come into it. I'll sit here and say I think Howard Costello is a successful government. Gary might disagree. We sit on different sides of politics. I look at something like Maggie Thatcher in the UK. I think she was very successful. I think her government was successful. Same with Reagan. But there's a lot of people who would disagree with me.
Yeah, and it can be very difficult as well, because it does sometimes you do have to look at the history in the full context. And I mean, without getting into a political argument, I mean, people really praise the Thatcher government for like an economic miracle in the 80s, and do seem to forget the fact that the economy was going into recession by the time she left office. It was going downhill. But I think that's something inherent within economics anyway, and it's just not a defense of Thatcher. People know my stance on that government. I'm probably very, very different to Chris on that one.
But that's it. It is what it is.
But sometimes sometimes it can be like one mistake or one political mistake of any government could be what a government gets remembered for. Like I think in years to come, for example, the Tony Blair's government is going to be remembered for Iraq and nothing else. For that is going to be anything else they did, good or bad. And I'm not going to say, quite frankly, I've often joked that Tony Blair was the best Conservative Prime Minister Britain ever had. He was a Labour PM, by the way. So people get the joke. But again, if you British politics, guy like, I mean, and a lot of the time it hangs on the individual in charge. Like in British history, Neville Chamberlain is only remembered for appeasing Adolf Hitler. Anything else he ever did in his political career or the record of his government isn't remembered. Similar thing with Anthony Eden and Suez,
Yeah. So we might, I guess we'll probably keep because I am going to be a little bit limited on time, so I might keep the questions sort of rolling in. What do we got?
All right, let's see here. Wait a minute. What did you? I pull away from the politics for just a second here. Steve McRae asks, "Does Tool suck?" Yes.
I'm only saying that because I know Aussie's in the background. They don't suck. I'm agnostic on them. You know what? They're not Nickelback. They're not Bowie. Nickelback being bad, Bowie being good. the two extremes. Yeah.
I don't dislike Tool. I've just never massively gone into them, but I don't dislike them.
I can't stand them. I have a question for you though, Chris.
All right. Sure.
Since you're a student of history, what is your favorite timeline on history?
15th century Europe.
Why 15th century?
Because you saw the fall of Constantine in 1451. Oh, sorry, Constantinople in 1451, which marked the end of the Roman Empire, which that was the end of the Roman Empire in the East, the breakup of Byzantium. But it was also an interesting time where there was a lot happening sort of within. It was just before the voyages of exploration started, and it was that time where I think Europe went from medieval to modern. So it was just interesting to look at some of the changes, even you see in places like Bohemia sort of finding its own sort of feet and breaking away a little bit from the Catholic Habsburgs. It's just an interesting time.
Yeah, it's
Edward Syriac said 1453.
Yeah. I was going to say actually, I thought it was.
I'm a shit. This is yeah, okay.
I mean, really. This
is what happens when I'm half a bottle of wine down at 10 o'clock at night, and yeah.
So you really talk about the sort of Renaissance sort of era, really there.
Yeah, just as the Renaissance is about to kick. So it was, it's sort of. It's about the time, Machiavelli is not too far away. And, there was some really interesting stuff happening in Europe in that period. It was just that kind of, was really coming to it. It's really coming into its own. You were starting to see a lot, even within the Holy Roman Empire, there was a lot going on there. You had a very powerful, Dane. The Danes were very powerful. It was just before, Sweden sort of broke away and became a very powerful nation in their own right. The Habsburgs didn't have the foothold in Spain at the time, so they were still an emerging power out of Austria, although they held the Holy Roman Crown. So but it was just an interesting time in history, I think.
Cool. Gary Priestley, do you support Australian intervention in conflicts overseas? And then I'm sorry I missed seeing this question again. We'll do that one and we'll jump back up to his.
It depends on the conflict. Look, I think it's intelligent for us to. I mean, I know we basically follow the US into any conflict. I don't think that's necessarily a dumb thing, considering if anything were to happen to us. The US is they're our big protector. I don't like war. I don't like conflict. I think it should only happen when absolutely necessary. I know there's certain opinions on whether things are absolutely necessary. I wish there was no war, but the reality is there's horrible stuff that happens in the world, and just the same as we wouldn't walk by while someone beat a child to death in the street. I think we need to have that similar sort of attitude. If there's horrible things happening in the world and we can do something about it, well, I think we need to.
Okay. Zenith asks, Australia might just need a third choice. What would it be?
I don't know what you mean by is it in a third political party?
I think so. I think that's what Zenith means.
Look, probably the closest there was the Greens are no good because the Greens are far left. One Nation's no good because they're far right. There isn't really anyone in the middle. Unfortunately, we've got a two-party system. It is what it is. I thought that Palmer might have been that third choice, or the United Australia Party that he was looking to bring back. It definitely wasn't that. Look, the Democrats were probably the closest thing back in the 90s, but then they kind of became, more of a left wing than a centrist party, and had their leader, leave the party to join Labor. That kind of said it all. Look, maybe we do need a third, like a centre ground party. I think generally Australian politics are fairly centred anyway, with a couple of extremes on either side. But I think when we had like Malcolm Turnbull and Bill Shorten as the Prime Minister and opposition leader, you probably had one of the furthest right Labor leaders and one of the furthest left Liberal leaders. So they're almost sort of holding hands. They were that close in the political spectrum, really. So
I think I can answer this. I can tell you exactly what Australia and every other nation around the world needs. You all need a monster raving loony party. You've got them in the UK. Every nation needs one.
Yeah, it was called the Palmer United Party. All right, what do we got?
All right, Gary Priestley, do you support consumer protections which impact economic growth?
Jeez, Gary, you're getting some good questions here. All consumer protection. I support consumer protection as a general principle. So yeah. Yep, 100%. Consumers should be protected.
Right.
Yep. If it impacts economic growth, well, okay. I don't know how it could really impact economic growth. I mean, if people buy a stack of faulty cars, and by handing back those faulty cars, it impacts the economy. Well, bad luck to the economy, I guess. Consumers should always be protected.
Cool. I got another question for you, by the way. So you being an atheist, what are your thoughts on people who actually have faith? And it doesn't matter what religion, so to say, but those that actually still have faith. What are your personal thoughts on that? Because I know you used to be huge into. I mean, you were going to become a pastor, but now you're not. And what are your thoughts on people who either are finding faith or have found faith or are still in faith?
Look, what people choose to believe is completely up to them. I've got my beliefs, and they are my beliefs, which are, well, I won't say a lack of belief, because I believe that there is no God. So by I know there's the big atheist fight over what's an atheist at the moment going on. By everyone's definition, I'm an atheist. So sometimes I wish I wasn't when I see the way the community carries on, but no, I'm an atheist. Look, people can believe, so long as it doesn't impact me or laws, things along those lines. I've got no issue. People can really believe whatever they want. I had lunch today with one of my closest mates, and he's a Christian. And we were having a laugh about how people just argue and can't get along and have differences of opinion. And think that means that they must not talk to each other. It's how tribal things are. Look, I don't care. I've got a bit of an issue with. I don't think religion should be taught in public schools unless it's from a historical point of view. I don't think scripture is necessary. I don't like the idea of child indoctrination into religion. However, I also understand that at the end of the day, how people choose to parent their children is completely up to them within reason, but each to their own. I mean, so long as it doesn't affect me, I think we should tax the churches. I don't think that there should be any big breaks for religious institutions, in the same, apart from what we would give to business. So if there's charitable things that a church does, that can be a tax deduction. But I still think that tax the churches, tax the mosques, the temples, the ashrams, whatever. But let people believe whatever the hell they want to believe, however wild and wacky or completely sane it is.
Oh, hail the spaghetti god.
Hail Jesus. I believe in Jesus, and Jesus and God.
You need a third part of that to make a holy trinity there.
Yeah, we're still working on it. James Henry asks, what does it entail being an atheist conservative?
What does it entail? Look, really, it's a theistic viewpoint, and it's a political viewpoint. Does it make any great difference? I guess no. Look, there's one thing I will say. Okay, there's a perception. There's a huge perception that all atheists are hardcore lefty SJWs. It couldn't be further from the truth. Okay, so in the Liberal Party, and just for the non-Australians here, the Liberal Party is our right-leaning party. There's a ton of atheists, but generally people who are conservative are less vocal about these things. They just tend to go with the flow. But yeah, there's a huge amount of secular or atheist conservatives. Most prefer to be called secular because they don't want any part of the atheist community, because really they only see what happens on Twitter, which is not reflective of the greater atheist community or secular community, I can assure you. It doesn't really entail anything, I guess. It's just I just live my life how I would, and I guess it's not too much different to, I think, if I was still a religious person, how I'd be. The only difference is I'd probably go to church on a Sunday. And as far as the political side of things, I guess if I wasn't a conservative, if my political viewpoint changed, I don't know what that would entail for me. But it's a fairly regular kind of,
Yeah. Okay. I'll ask a question, Chris.
Go for
it. Do you think religion has a place in politics at all?
Ooh. Yes and no. I think that the views of religious people still need to be represented, the same as the views of anyone needs to be represented. I don't think that religious belief should necessarily start, dictating policy. It's, I don't think, for instance, if we talk about same-sex marriage, I don't think that people should be able to say, well, I don't think we should have that because it's against my religious viewpoint. Well, that's their religious viewpoint. That shouldn't impact. If someone says, well, I don't believe we should have it because, and then gives a non-religious viewpoint, okay, well, I think that's a more justified viewpoint, even if I disagree with it. I think there's a fine line is probably the I'll call it the gutless answer I'm going to give is there's a fine line. And where that fine line is, I'm not too sure.
All right. Gary Priestley, have you read the published policies of the Greens? And if you have, is there any published policy you disagree with? Must be published policy.
Well, I'm diametrically opposed to the Greens are a left-wing party, that hold a completely different range of views. To me, when the last election was on, I read the Greens policies just so I was aware of what they were for when debates and things like that came up and where they opposed our policies. Okay, you want an example? They want to have free university. I disagree with that. And I disagree with refunding HECS debts or wiping HECS debts. Reason I disagree with that is because there's a lot of people who worked 2 and 3 jobs while they're in university, so they didn't have a HECS debt. Why should those people be punished because for doing that? And I think at the end of that, I think too many people go to university for the wrong reasons. I think people just go to university for the sake of it. I remember when as a mature age student, going to university and sitting in a class in my first week, and they're going around just asking people, what degree they're planning to do, why they're planning to do it. I knew exactly what I was there and doing. And the amount of people that just went, oh, I don't know, Mum just wanted me to come here. I was going to work it out while I'm here. That shouldn't be what university's for. If people want to do that, take a gap year and work out what the hell you want to do rather than, basically live off the public dollar while you're working out what you want to do. I would have loved to have gone to university straight out of high school. I couldn't afford it. It's I'm fairly fortunate now, but I come from extremely humble beginnings. I was living on my own at 17. And basically fending for myself, working jobs. I would have loved to have gone to university. I couldn't afford it. I went years after when I could afford it, and I was in a position to support myself through that. So I guess that's an example of one policy that I disagree with. But I mean, look, and even though I said before that I don't buy into the political spectrum too much, but I mean where the Greens sit and where I sit, we're diametrically opposed on a lot of things. I have frequent sparring matches with Greens councillors where I live, and left-wing councillors where I live, even though I'm not on council. But I run business organisations, and I've obviously had political involvement here, so I'm forever sparring with them. But no, it's the Greens. I don't like I don't mind the environmental element to the Greens, but I don't like the neo-Marxist element to the Greens, which we have had with people like Lee Rhiannon, Marine Faruqi, just to name a couple.
Can I ask, because I'll just say something, because I don't know much about Australia's Greens, but I mean our Green Party is obviously mainly left. I'd say liberal to left leaning, most of them. But yeah, I mean, I've Caroline Lucas, who's the only Green MP in Britain. I've met her several times. Don't agree with everything she says, but I have a lot of respect for her. But I found the Greens interesting that where she's an MP was Brighton, where they also, I don't know if they still are, they actually won a council down there. And yet it was the Greens who were the first ones to actually, this hasn't been done in like generations, they cut all the wages of all the public sector workers under their, that were working for that council.
That wouldn't happen here. Different here.
Yeah, which was interesting, because the weird thing is you had the Green MP on supporting these people, these workers who went out on council workers who went out on strike against this wage cut. She was there on the picket line supporting them against her own councillors, which is a really weird. That's a really weird thing.
And that happens. What I find is you get a lot of people who like to play big politics in councils. I think that happens in every party. There's a saying: it's very easy to go all in when you're playing with peanuts. I think a lot of councils overstep their mark. Now, look, our Greens. They're a little bit divided. There's certainly it's the former Greens leader, a guy called Richard Di Natale. I really like Richard Di Natale. He's a really, really very well spoken, articulate kind of guy. He's a nice guy. I've met him before. He's a really nice guy. I'd happily sit down and have a beer with him. Politically, we're diametrically opposed. I think he's in it. He's someone who's in it for the right reasons. Was in it for the right reasons. I think most politicians are in it for the right reasons. It's just, I look at it this way. I think everyone wants the best for the country, the state, council, whatever. There's just different ideas on how to achieve that and what is in the best interest. And that's why we have different political parties. So what do we got?
All right, yeah.
This has all been pretty tame so far.
Ozman cometh. Chris,
given
what's happening in the U.S. right now, what is your personal and then professional opinion over ACAB? And then the same question, but Black Lives Matter. I don't know what ACAB is.
All coppers are bastards.
Okay, I think that's a completely fucked up principle. It's completely wrong. All cops are not bastards. There's a very small minority of police who have done the wrong thing, and I say a very small minority of police who have done the wrong thing. The majority of police risk their life to protect the community. Police isn't a highly paid job. It's police. I'm the son of two police officers. Straight up, I'm the son of two police officers. Both of my parents are no longer in the police, and both my parents saw some pretty horrible stuff and had to deal with some horrible stuff. I remember sitting there as a kid, hearing about, police being shot at or something like that, or an accident involving police, and my heart stopping every time, even as an adult. Whenever there was anything, because it was, shit, is that my parents? And I can assure you, there's not a lot of money in it. I think there's issues in the United States with policing, and I think those issues are a bigger part of a bigger problem in the United States where there's too much government. There's way too much government. Cities shouldn't be having police forces. At a minimum, it should be states. But even with 50 states, I think there'd have to be a better solution. The problem is when you've got all these smaller police forces is they can't get the same quality training that across the board. You're going to have some highly trained professional police officers, and then you have police officers like you had in Minneapolis who are not highly trained and who don't necessarily do the right thing. There was an Australian woman who was shot in Minneapolis by a police officer, and it seems to be a bit of an issue there. But the defunding the police is probably one of the dumbest ideas I have ever come across. Because if you defund the police, who the hell's going to protect us? Okay, it's if someone commits a crime, if someone's breaking into your house, and especially here in Australia where we don't have, we're not all packing a gun, that's for sure. Who are you going to call if you've got a problem that you need solved? If someone's threatening you, if you know that your neighbour's being, a victim of domestic violence, who are you going to call? That's what gets forgotten. Look, there's like any group, there is a bad minority of cops, and you get a few who are, they put the uniform on and they think that they're 10 foot tall and their shit doesn't stink. They're normally the younger ones coming through. And from what I saw back in the day, all they used to do was just give them a bit of a clip around the back of the head and say, hey, pull your head in. That's not how we do things. But no, I'm very, very strong on that, and that's not going to change. BLM, oh, God. All right, here we go. Do Black Lives Matter? Absolutely, yes, they do. Is there a problem with systemic racism in the United States? As far as I can see, yes, there is. I believe it's a socio-economic issue. I don't believe that there's necessarily a bunch of racists who are out there just wanting to hate on black people because they're black or something like that. But clearly there's some issues that haven't been resolved. Once again, I think it's part of the larger issues that the United States has. I don't think, there's a lot of poor people of all races, I guess. But obviously it's there's a proportionally bigger issue within the African American or black community in the United States. Certainly, I think that people who are white have probably got it a lot easier. I'd also say it's probably worth noting that the economically the stronger states in the United States are those that are northern, and that the African American population is lower there. I think having the protests while there's a pandemic is just insane. I think it put more lives at risk. There is a nasty element that absolutely latched onto it. So things like riots. Riots are not part of protesting. I don't care. Breaking in and graffitiing Mercedes and setting things alight, and I don't like that. I know in Australia we had a bit of a political element that jumped on the BLM protests we had here, which for me, I don't understand why we needed to have the protests here. I'm all for showing solidarity with the issues that are happening in the US, but we've got a fairly big breakout in Melbourne at the moment that may or may not be linked to that, with the entire state back in lockdown. Anyway, in Australia, for instance, what they were protesting was in the Indigenous deaths in custody. Now, they're absolutely, people die in jail, okay? We do have Indigenous deaths in custody. However, the Indigenous death rate in custody is half that of the non-Indigenous. So, people were arguing that we had to bring it down. Well, I think we should bring a lot of things down. People are going to die in jail. I mean, people get life sentences, people get old. The majority of Indigenous deaths in custody have been natural causes. So, I think that in Australia, they just latched onto it because it seemed to be the there was no one cared about it until people started protesting in the US. Additionally, it was organised in, and this isn't just me going, lefties are bad. In Australia, in Melbourne, the protest was organised by the Australian Communist Party. The one that was meant to be organised for Sydney last week, that Paddy, whatever his name is, who is, he is whiter than me. He's a renowned socialist protester. If there's an issue, him and the Socialist Alliance are there protesting it. So I don't like that what's clearly an issue that does need to be discussed and does need to be fixed. I hate it when these things get hijacked by people with political agendas that don't necessarily fit into what the actual problem is. Installing socialism and communism isn't going to fix systemic racism.
Okay, I've got something here from Granny and then from Steve. It ties it together here. Granny says defund the police isn't abolishing it. It means giving their funding and responsibility to other agencies. And Steve puts in that if they have a budget, say, of $1 million, you take $200,000 of that, invest it in infrastructure, homeless shelters, mental health facilities, equaling less crime, which equals less police. That's what they're meaning by defunding the police.
Or you increase it and give them better training in the US, which is what they need. They need better training. Look, there's a simple way. If you want to do that, you want to bring the cost down. It's really simple in the US. Stop having city-based police departments. Have them as state-based, because then your training costs are going to go down. Your overall costs are going to go down because it's run through the state rather than individual cities. You're not having trying to poach this one, poach that one. It will actually bring the cost down because you're centralizing it, and then you can invest in those programs.
I mean, I'm going to say, because there's a lot I could have come back on there, but I'm conscious of obviously time and that there's not turning this into a massive debate on the police and Black Lives Matter. I mean, I do. To my shame, I'm going to hold my hands up. In the past, I have used that ACAB thing before. I don't use it anymore because I've come to realise it wasn't very useful, in my opinion. I just felt I wasn't having very useful discussions when I'd see something about the police and put up ACAB, but I used to do that. However, and again, a lot of my experiences are looking at UK police. What I see in the United States, there's an awful. Of course, not all coppers are bastards or anything like that. And I think believing the majority of cops are trying. They do have a difficult job to do. I understand that. What I sometimes see an issue with is, one, I think has been a long issue with actual proper accountability with the bodies that actually monitor the police. I do see a massive issue there. And I definitely think there has been a culture, and again, I can only speak to the UK. I can't. What
I might do, I'll just quickly jump in, only because I do want to keep it going. And I know that a lot of people are sort of wanting to get the conservative sort of mindset. I think you and I are probably going to agree on a lot of stuff there with this. I think Jeff, but I might keep it moving. Sorry, no, I don't mean to be.
I understand. I understand.
The time.
Yeah, I understand. Right. I just wanted to maybe put a few cents in on this one, because this might be some areas where you and I aren't quite seeing eye to eye, but hey,
yeah, probably that's all right, and that's fine. We can disagree. That's all good. What do we got next?
Well, there's a bunch of comments going through here. The Rage. If you're against big government, how can you be for big police?
I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm for centralising police. Look, in Australia, we have each state has their own police force, and in America, what I can see is each council has their own police force. Essentially, if you've got a centralised police force, you're lowering your costs straight away because you're not having training facilities. You're not having to. Okay, let's say you've got a state with 10 councils or 10 sets of police force. So that's 10 sets of people who are getting paid for training, and only one of them is the best. That's 10 10 sets of a lot of other parts of basic infrastructure. If you've just got that one set of basic infrastructure, that one set of training, that centralized place that they can all go to, well, then all of a sudden you're going to drop your costs.
Sorry, Rage. Rage, I'm going to jump in here real quick. Rage says conservatives, not Chris.
Oh, okay. Why are they after bigger police forces? I don't know in the US, straight up. In Australia, I think we're pretty comfortable with. I think you always want better policing numbers to keep people safe. I think that it's probably that's actually something I'll straight up. I don't know the answer to that. My viewpoint is that centralize it. Have as many police as you need. I mean, ideally, you want to have a situation one day where you don't need police because there's no crime. But we're not at that stage. I think in the US, what scares me in the US is why would you even contemplate defunding the police in a country where everyone's got a gun? And you've got one of the highest murder rates in the world. I think second only to Colombia, although you might have taken over Colombia since they sort of got rid of the cartels there.
Nope.
No, Colombia's still number one.
I keep an eye on it. It's not Colombia, actually. It's Venezuela.
Venezuela, I think now, yeah.
Yep, Venezuela.
The socialist paradise of Venezuela. Sorry, I had to get my dig in there. Yeah, okay, but regardless, it's I think certainly in the first world, it's substantially higher. So I guess I question that. There is a lot of differences between what I call American conservatism and the rest of the world. American conservatism is a little bit of an anomaly in it's got a little bit more of a libertarian flavor, but it's also very religious. It's unique. It's American conservatism is not global conservatism, I don't think, by any means. But yeah. So anyway, short answer. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. And in fact, I just think that each jurisdiction needs to work out, what they need. I think if you've got a higher crime rate, maybe increasing the police to keep people safe or as a preventative measure. But you've also got to look at other programs as well.
Okay. Gary Priestley, once again, do you believe
Gary's been dreaming for this.
Do you believe do you believe in corporate bailouts?
Nope, I don't.
Plain and simple.
Nope. Very simple. Look, the only exception being if there's a company and they go broke and you can save a lot of jobs, yes, but then if that's the case, then the government, what the government invests is what the government gets back out. You don't have a corporate base. So, okay, Virgin Australia is a good example. They were going broke. No, the government shouldn't have bailed them out unless the government was going to buy them and have them as an asset and then potentially sell them down the track. Yeah, maybe a different story. But no, I think I've seen some of the corporate bailouts in the US. So I scratch my head with those. No.
On my word, look, once again, the conservative and the socialist in the room agreeing on something.
What will happen next?
Yeah. It's just, I've had a massive issue with some of the corporate bailouts I saw back in 2008. I mean, perhaps where not Chris and I might part ways on this, that a little bit is somewhere if they are going to be bailed out to save jobs, or like what we have with banks or whatever.
If you're
I do think there needs to be government oversight once you have done that. I don't think you just give them money and let them carry on the way they were going before.
No. The government at that point, let's say if it was Jeff's car yard that employs 500 people is going broke because Jeff, hasn't necessarily, circumstances have happened or whatever's happened, and Jeff goes to the government and says, "Government, I need money because otherwise 500 people are going to lose their job." I've got no problems with the government saying, you know what, okay, we're going to invest the money in that company, Jeff. That's no problems. What we're going to do is we're going to give X amount of dollars to ensure that these people keep their jobs. But Jeff, unfortunately, there is one job that will go, and that's yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're going to put someone in to manage it. It's now either a government-owned institution, or the government has a percentage, a shareholding in that, and will be treated as a shareholder.
Yeah, well, I can always think of a very, very good example of that, which people remember the British businessman Sir Clive Sinclair.
No idea who you're talking about.
Very famous, like one of the breakthroughs in computers, like things like Sinclair Spectrum and that. And but he was very much held up in the 80s as the poster child of British business. Although he wasn't as good of a businessman as but in the 70s he took a bailout for one of his companies, Sinclair Radionics, and then got very, very annoyed because of the fact that he couldn't run the company as he saw fit. That it was like, we're bailing you out, but we're basically buying shares.
It's no longer his company at that point. Yeah. It's a shareholding. It needs to be treated the same as any other company.
But the thing to me, and this is one of the things that I always never got with him, is that he always moaned about the government interference. I said, well, you knew that when you were happy to take their money when you were in trouble. There's, you shouldn't be complaining, because then you knew what the consequence of taking that money would be. So I didn't.
Yep. That's it. You can't have your cake and eat it.
Yeah.
Well, I apologize to Art. I missed a question way back.
Oh no.
Art wants to know, Chris, do you think there's a problem with money and politics in Oz?
I think there's a problem with money and politics globally. Probably not so much in Australia. I think we're fairly heavily regulated. Like, oh God, when I ran for state parliament, holy crap, the paperwork you had to fill out just for a small donation. There's limits on donors. I think we're fine compared to the rest of the world. No, we're fine. The only time that can be an exception is where someone like Clive Palmer spends 20 million of his own money bombarding us with ads. But I guess that's how he chose to spend his money. It was on his own political party. I would have probably had an issue if he had donated that money to either the Liberal or Labor Party and then wanted favours.
All right. Remember, Sammy Jenkins asked if you guys want to address Lee Spanner's comment. Lee Spanner comment said, where'd it go? I just lost it. God damn it. Police don't serve and protect anyone. They have evolved into an income generators for the government.
Yeah, well, Lee's wrong. They do serve and protect. And I don't know if Lee's still there, but Lee, if you had a problem and, who do you call? You call the police. I think this whole the police are all evil is it's a bullshit narrative.
Okay, Barrows.
So I'll be pretty blunt with that. And look, anyone wants to go after the cops, well, do what you want. There's good and bad. There's good cops. There's bad cops. The majority of cops are good, decent, hardworking people who go out there and risk their lives so we can all live in a safer society. Let's not politicize them. But the ones who are bad, let's fucking throw the book at them. Like that douchebag in the United States who killed George Floyd. Hell yeah, lock him up, throw away the key. And you know what? Because he's a police officer who's abused his position in that way, it should be harsher punishment. It should be harsher punishment in that circumstance. But this whole all police are bad. No, they are not. Most police are hardworking people. It's not a glorious, glamorous job. People do it because they're, I probably idealistically to start with, and they're wanting to serve the community. People don't wake up and go, I hate black people. I'm going to join the police so I can beat them up on a daily basis. That's not how it works. That's not reality. And there are people of color who are in and running police forces. So it's, give me a break. Anyway. Yeah.
So, Beryl Stindle, way off topic. What are your thoughts on protecting your home/property in Australia without too much force? And then
Sorry, can I get that again?
So, what are your thoughts on protecting your home and property in Australia without too much force? And he says could be a discussion for another night.
I think reasonable force. If someone broke into my house right now and I had something blunt to hit them over the head with, I'm probably going to defend my house because I've got my kids in here. I'm not going to risk it. I think reasonable force is. I think the word reasonable is probably the key. Reasonable force.
The Rage says, I think all institutions of power attract the worst: police, clergy, politics.
I 100% agree. People who have bad, motives and are power hungry will try and put themselves in those positions. They're the ones who we've got the issue with, but it's the minority, not the majority. Even politics. There's plenty of people I disagree with, vehemently in politics. I don't think they're bad people. It's just they just have a difference of opinion to me. Same with religious leaders. I think most people who are religious leaders are doing it for the right reason. It's but then you get the bad ones who know that they can put themselves in a position where they can take advantage. Sociopaths are sociopaths. There's nothing you can't avoid it. And sociopaths are going to put themselves in positions of power. It's unfortunate. That's why the punishments should be harsher when it comes to dealing with these people. That's why I'm saying that the guy who killed George Floyd, his punishment should be harsher than it would be for someone who committed that crime without a badge.
All right. Paul Camish, what do you think about 10% of the population having 80% of the wealth?
That's a global problem. I think everyone who's
I think that's what he means. The globally.
That's changing. What you're going to find, it's not something that can be fixed overnight, and that's an unfortunate reality. What we're finding, and China's a great example. China 40 years ago was virtually a third world country. Now it's rising. India's doing the same. There's parts of Africa that have been traditionally very poor where you're going to see a middle class rise. The rise of the middle class in places like Thailand, Vietnam. We're certainly seeing a change in global economy. I think we'll eventually get to a point, and maybe I'm an idealist, where there's a global standard. There's no easy fix for it, and I think even if you just took all the money in the world and spread it out evenly, it's not going to change anything. You've got some people who are naturally going to be better with money. You've got some people who will work harder. You're always going to have discrepancy. Sorry. It's a reality. But I think we're probably living in the best time globally now. It's not always the case for everyone, but I think from a global perspective, it's catching up. I'd be very interested, and I hope I'm alive to see the world in 2100, because I think a lot of these problems will have evaporated.
Can I ask Chris a question, Jay?
Go ahead.
I'm trying to think how to phrase this, because obviously we talked a lot about police and know your background. I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Do you think there is a legitimate issue though with where we do have bad cops or whatever do things?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's sometimes a legitimate issue of police forces closing ranks around something like this when there is an incident like this?
Not in my experience. In my experience, where there's bad cops, the police actually really want to get rid of them because they know the reaction that they're going to get. And that's based on my experience and the conversations I've overheard growing up. Look, I know plenty of cops. I know what they've expressed to me from a personal point of view. We had a massive police royal commission in the 90s where a lot of the corrupt police were weeded out, and it was police driven. The police wanted these people gone. They wanted them out of the police force. look, there might be some closing of ranks in some circumstances, but I think in general, cops want bad cops out as much as the rest of us.
Okay.
All right, question from Steve. Do you think Trump is a sociopath lacking empathy?
It's an interesting question. Yes. There you go.
There you go.
but that's not uncommon in people who have had his level of success, unfortunately. I think to become a billionaire, you've almost got to have that mindset in a way, because it's, if it was easy, everyone would do it. But yeah, do I think he's a sociopath, lacking empathy? Probably, yeah.
Well, they say there are two types of sociopaths. One are basically politicians and the elites, and the other are the ones that become killers. So
yeah,
it's
look,
really
hard to
determine which route they're going to go down.
They're not mutually exclusive either.
Yeah, no, I don't think Trump's evil. Do I think he always acts in his own self-interest? Yeah, big time. Ever since Trump got elected, his focus has been on getting re-elected. What I think would be interesting with Trump is after the next election, when he's not running for office, whether his views on certain things change, whether he's elected or not. I can certainly guarantee there'll be a lot less evangelicals hanging around him, and probably a lot more porn stars.
Gary Preece.
There's nothing wrong with porn stars either. I'm just going to say that.
Gary Preece. How should we treat asylum seekers?
With as much compassion as we can, where they're genuine asylum seekers. I think that it's a global issue, and we need to find a global solution for it. I don't just think that people should be going to the wealthiest nations, or if they do, I don't think there should be any obligations that they need to stay. I think there needs to be a better global solution. But look, I think there's a lot of horrible things going on in the world. We need to treat people with as much compassion as possible. But the reality is, if there's 50 million refugees in the world, Australia, with its population of 25 million, can't take them all.
Can I just ask you a question? Okay, it's a little bit of humour. It's a bit of humour in this. I'm
not a humorous person.
Well, so do you think then? Because I did hear something. That's, I can't remember which Australian politician said this, but something about boat people. That was the phrase that was used, coming to Australia. Do you think that stopping boat people coming back to Australia should be backdated to 1770?
Mate, no problem. So long as you've got somewhere for me to stay in England, there, mate. I'll come visit. It's here's something historically, and I often like to put this in perspective. In 1788, there were a bunch of people who were imprisoned and brought to Australia against their will. Now, there was some horrible stuff that happened to the Indigenous people who were here, but the people who came to Australia on the First Fleet and on the boats as prisoners, they didn't want to come here. It's probably worked out for the better, because here's better than England. But they didn't want to come here. They were prisoners. They were essentially slaves. Now, they were able to get their freedom. Like there's no question about that. But I mean, it's not this rosy, the white people happily jumped on a boat and came and conquered. It's not that at all. The British government has a lot to answer for, but I mean, it's also history. It happened throughout the world. If it wasn't the English, it would have been the French or the Dutch or it could have been anyone. It was an unfortunate inevitability, and it happened on a global scale.
Actually, as well, just to add a little tiny thing on that as well, because it often gets said, it was all of England's criminals who put out there. It doesn't necessarily mean they were all criminals in the sense that they were all thieves and robbers or whatever. A lot of them were political dissidents as well. Who were
the Irish, especially. Yep.
Irish,
the Irish. The Irish were harshly and horribly treated throughout Australian history. It wasn't. Look, I'll give you an example of one of my ancestors who got put on a boat. He was actually came from a reasonably well-to-do family in York. He worked for a solicitor. What had happened was he had to go and pick up some documents. And the documents could only be picked up by the solicitor. So he forged the solicitor's signature, grabbed the documents, took them back to the solicitor, got done for forgery, and his punishment was 7 years in Australia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one I was thinking of when I was mentioning it was the famous the thing known in England as they're celebrated in England now by the trade unions, they're called the Toll Puddle Martyrs. And they're a group of farmers who were transported to Australia for forming a union. That was effectively, that's the short version of it, but that's why they were given like 10 or 15 years transportation for forming a union.
Yeah, and that's it. It's there was a 10-year-old boy who was orphaned. He's an example for you. So there's a 10-year-old boy who was orphaned at a very young age, lived on the streets, had to fend for himself. He was arrested for he'd stolen some clothes to basically sell so he could feed himself. A 10-year-old boy. He was arrested and he was charged with imprisonment and originally was going to be sent to America, but the boat he was on was actually they mutineered and they captured him. Now, this 10-year-old boy, for being on this boat, was going to be executed, but then, and because they couldn't send them to America anymore because Americans had a revolution. But then they decided to send him to Australia. So this 10-year-old boy, an orphan, someone who should have been protected by society, that's one of the convicts we're talking about who got sentenced to hard labor. Hard labor on the other side. Imagine that as a 10-year-old kid. That's the history of Australia. That's what happened. That's the kind of story. The same thing happened with young girls, and the young girls were basically forced into prostitution when they were brought out here. I mean, what happened to the convicts of Australia is horrific. And really, we're not talking hardened criminals. We're talking people who are just trying to survive, people who are trying to eat. People who just didn't have any food. So. It's Australia. There's a lot of hatred towards, or seeming racial hatred worldwide at the moment. And I think it's important to remember that not all white people had it that great in history. Yeah, we probably don't have it too bad now. I won't deny that. But I think when you look at history, I think history really people need to start looking at history objectively. It's rather than just looking at history to push whatever political narrative they want to. Sorry, that was a bit more of a rant than anyone was expecting, but as a historian, an Australian historian, that's my I know the rages in the comments there. He's just going, that's not a rant, that's not angry, like give me a break. It's my laid back Australian nature.
I do have a question. Do you have a question for me? Just get off topic a little bit. Get away from politics. If you don't, that's fine. We can continue. Or do you have a question for Jeff?
I do have a question for you, Jay.
Mm-hmm.
When you told me that you loved me the other day, did you mean that in a romantic way or a brotherly way?
Well, I have to tell you
because you were giving me googly eyes. So just to be clear.
We'll save that till we're off stream.
Not in the same way that Darth loves you.
Darth doesn't love me anymore. Darth's moved on. Darth's found new people. Darth found Ethan.
Yeah, the what is it? I can't remember the YF whatever.
Your friendly neighborhood atheist.
Yeah. He's a good guy, actually. Good guy, Ethan.
Yeah, he's nice.
So what else have we got? There's got to be some other good questions.
Do you believe unions have a net positive effect on the country?
Do I believe
unions?
Sorry, unions
have a net positive effect on the country.
Yeah, a lot of unions do a lot of good. I think there's, once again, you get some sociopaths in unions. I think what's going on in the CFMEU is probably a good example of that. But no, look, I've got family who are in unions and have been very active in unions. I think that I don't like that the unions. What I don't like about the unions is that they support one side of politics generally, and they donate money to that side of politics, and that the Labor Party is essentially funded by the unions. I don't necessarily like that, because there's a lot of people who, by virtue of their occupation, have to join a union. And then, their money, even though they're not a Labor supporter, goes to the Labor Party, which I don't think that's right. But they're also individual organisations. I don't think union membership should be mandatory. It's good and bad to everything.
Can I ask you, do you still have closed shops in Australia on unions?
Yeah.
Wow, we haven't had them here for like 30 years.
I mean, as far as I'm aware, I'm not huge on. I'm on the other side of politics. I do live in a union town, though. So the town I live in, it's a steel producing town, and it's a mining town. It's like the north of England, but just south of Sydney. It's we're very. It's a very union town, and very swayed to one side of politics where I am, which unfortunately for me is not my side of politics. Otherwise, I might be coming to you from Canberra right now. But unfortunately, look, it's unions, good and bad. There's people who get into things. Okay, you know what? It's like that power thing we were talking about with the police before. You know what? You get some absolute dipshits that get into unions and do it for the wrong reasons, and you get some real good people too. I mean, you get some people who just get into the unions because it's the next step in their political career, and I think we've seen that. Craig Thompson, you two guys wouldn't have heard. Craig Thompson headed up the Health Services Union. It was all just a stepping stone for him to get into federal parliament, and he spent the union money on prostitutes on a regular basis. He used his union credit card to go and see hookers in Sydney. So I think he eventually got jailed though, so that's okay. But Bill Shorten, who's the former Labor Party leader, he basically, his whole career was union. He went from union and used it as a stepping stone. There are a lot of people in the unions who don't necessarily get into it because they're champions of the working people, but they get into it because it's the next step in their political career. And I think that there's some things in unions like where a union will negotiate a very good deal with a company like a McDonald's, so they can pay their workers shit, and then that company goes and donates large amounts to the political campaign of that union leader when they eventually run for parliament. That's where I've got an issue with it. But no, unions are in general good things.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of what you just described here probably would not happen in the UK. And I mean, I know I've been a union activist for a long time. In my
hold 1/3 of the voting power in the UK for the Labor Party.
Yeah,
they don't have that power here in Australia.
Not every. I mean, it's actually, if you look at a lot of the trade unions in the UK, there's actually a relatively small amount of them that are actually affiliated to the Labour Party, but it is the big unions that are.
It's different. The bigger ones definitely are here in Australia. So you'll probably find it's fairly similar. Australia and England are the same dynamic. A lot of the time.
I do need to stress. Stress this point now, though, on unions in the UK, that there is an option. That it is absolutely optional to pay into the political levy. That is something that they. So basically, you have to. That's something that you kind of have to consent that part of your subs go to the political levy. And I'd actually, personally, I'd say this is just, and I'll get this out quickly, then we'll get back on topic. But I pay into the political levy, even though I'm not a Labour supporter. I'd personally like to see the political levy split, but two different levies, one for Labour Party and one for other political campaigning, which includes obviously lobbying Parliament, that sort of thing, which is more what I want.
That's what it should be useful.
I mean, even though I'm probably a Labour voter, most of the time I vote Labour. I'd probably sooner not see my union so in bed with the Labour Party, but I do understand from it's a long historical context because
and that's the thing, it's historical.
Yeah.
So, well, I got another way off topic. Of all the Christian relics, which one do you believe is, or which one would you think is the most true to actually be what they say it is? You know, like the Shroud of Turin, the Spear of Destiny, those type of relics.
The Gutenberg Bible. None of them. I'm a mythicist, so I don't think there was a Jesus. So things like the Shroud of Turin, no. The Gutenberg Bible, because it was the first printed book in the world. We know it exists because we know where it is. If I had to pick a relic, no. I don't think there's anything.
It doesn't have to be anything related with Jesus either, though.
Maybe some of the early writings of Paul that we can confirm. I think there's a 2nd century copy of Corinthians that's in the British Museum. Yeah, it wasn't written by Paul in the 2nd century, obviously, but it's probably an accurate copy. I'm just hoping that Christianity becomes a relic one day, to be honest. Can I say that? No, look, the Spear of Destiny, the Shroud of Turin, they're all medieval scams. Essentially, it's all money-making scams. But good question. So
what? Tying on to that one, what would be your thoughts on? Let me try to rephrase this right. Do you think the whole Nazi occult part, was that just blind faith, or do you think there was they actually thought and feel that there was stuff behind that?
I think they did. They were fairly spiritual, the Nazis, and certain aspects, especially the SS. They it was all part of their racial, destiny, and that was a divinely driven. So I definitely think that, from a historian's point of view, yes, there was definitely occult practices within the Nazis, in particular the SS.
Yeah, so I was going to say that because obviously some people know my background. I used to be a Norse pagan, and a lot of the SS were, I think, very much into a highly bastardized version of.
Oh hell yeah, yeah. Yeah, because it was the glorious blonde-haired gods, Here's an interesting story. Okay, so, and it's to do with England, actually, and the SS. So I believe it was 1937, the British foreign minister, a guy called Lord Kitchener, visited Germany on a diplomatic mission. Now, Lord Kitchener was about 6'4" and blonde.
Kitchener was dead by that. If it's the Kitchener I'm thinking of.
Lord Kitchener? No.
The famous one for on the World War One poster. It's Lord Kitchener. No. I want you.
No.
Okay.
No.
I'll check it. I'll check who it was.
British Foreign Minister. If I've got another historical thing, and Second World War isn't my expertise, but sorry, no, it might have been Anthony Eden. British Foreign Minister in about 37. He was about 6'4" and blonde. Anyway, the SS, they saw him and they pointed to him as the ideal and perfect Aryan, because the Germans believed that the British were, the French weren't, but the British were part of the Aryan race. Because this particular English leader, which I think you're about to tell me with Anthony Eden, ate porridge every morning. The SS
it could have been
ate porridge.
It could either have been Eden or Lord Halifax, who were both sort of held their positions around a similar time. So it could have been.
Yeah, I think it was Anthony Eden. I'm pretty sure it was Anthony Eden. But anyway, that's why the SS ate porridge. So that gives you an insight into the mindset of the SS. They thought by eating porridge they'd get all these tall 6'4". They hadn't seen the rest of England clearly, but who weren't blonde and 6'4". But yeah. Anyway, moving on. What else have we got?
Another
questions, actually.
We got another political one from Gary.
No, Gary. Actually, we haven't heard much from Gary tonight. Gary's been waiting. Gary's been waiting for this.
If you were to discover that conservative policies lead to poor societal outcomes, would that change your views?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I don't believe they do, and I've studied them well enough to. Oh, I mean, look, not all conservative policies are good. Okay, I'm not a tribal team player when it comes to that. I'm not just going to go, my side said it, so it must be great. No, because there's good and bad on all sides. And I'll happily, if there's something that's going to have a bad outcome, I'll happily not support it. Bit of a loaded question. I don't think anyone's going to say, yes, I'm for worse outcomes just from my side of politics. But to me, it's simple. It's now what those outcomes are could be contentious or debated, and the overall situation has to be put into context, of course. But it's I believe that conservative economics, and like I said, I'm socially liberal, but conservative economics, I believe, are the best for a prosperous society. If I didn't believe that, then if I didn't believe it was the best, then I wouldn't be a conservative. But by the same token, I understand that there's people who disagree with me, and that's because they genuinely believe what they believe, and that's fine. A lot of things, unfortunately, we have to look at through the lens of history, where we can have policies that are passed today, and we're not going to know how they affect society for years. All we can do is make the best judgment with the information we've got, and obviously ideology comes into it as well. But I think politicians on both sides generally want the best outcomes.
So two-part question from Gary. Which conservative policies are not good? And poverty has increased under conservative governments. Is that an indicator?
I don't think poverty's increased under conservative governments. I'd like to see those stats and the context of them. I'd be pretty surprised. I mean, certainly this year it hasn't been that great, but that's not anything to do with conservative policies. That's to do with the big global bug that's going around. So, there's a lot of circumstances that get taken into account. You could argue, and not that I want to argue for him, but in the United States, they had economic growth when they went from Obama to Trump. I don't really consider Trump to be a conservative, incidentally. I think he's a populist and a protectionist. But, there's a lot of different things that you can argue. And no, as far as conservative policies, I think are bad. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any, but I'm sure there probably would be a couple if I were to look into them.
Okay. Grumpy old dude, do cow farts bother you?
That's why we've got global warming, isn't it?
Oh, and he just retracted it.
If cow farts didn't bother me, I wouldn't be a human.
I actually worked in a slaughterhouse for about 8 months, and I got to the point I couldn't smell it anymore.
Yeah, I don't want to ever get to that point.
I'm happy to the cow smells. I just couldn't smell them anymore.
I'm happy to be ignorant. James Henry did put something in the chat. I just saw. Yes, Trump is an isolationist. So old school, very traditional American policies dating back to the first, even pre-First World War, or probably that in between the First World War and Second World War, that real America isolationist, protectionist kind of, I don't think he's a conservative. I think he has a lot of conservatives around him, but anyway. I also think he's a sociopath, as we found out tonight. So,
who's your favorite superhero?
Batman.
Really? Why Batman?
Yep. Because he's Batman.
It's because he's a conservative. He's taking up for the rich billionaire. That's why.
No, look. I've always okay. So I am a comic nerd. I am a full-blown comic nerd. I just love reading Batman comics. So it's because he's got that superhero aspect, but he's also a detective. He's intensely smart, and I like that. I like the psychology behind Batman. I will say that the Flash does come in a pretty close second. I'm actually my next tattoo that I'm getting is going to be the bat symbol with the Flash lightning bolt going through it.
See,
or maybe the Red Death.
See, mine's Nightcrawler.
Okay, yeah. The very religious, the Nightcrawler.
Well, he's also a pirate and a gymnast.
Depends on which version you get. They've just rebooted the X-Men, so
did they again?
Big time. Oh, they've like massively. Yeah, it's like I'll House of X and Power of X. Read them.
I think getting a very, very strong correction there from Manda about please not call climate change global warming.
Oh, did I do that? Sorry. Yeah. My bad. Now, I am going to address something the Rage said. Wolverine would kick Batman's ass. No. But if you ever want to see something ridiculously cool, back in the 90s, Marvel and DC had this Marvel versus DC where for like 1 month they merged characters, and Batman and Wolverine merged into this character called the Dark Claw. It is one of the coolest comics.
Oh, the amalgamation. Yeah, I love those.
I've got the entire run, but the Dark Claw is just like I'll find it before the end of the episode. I'll find a pic. Actually, while we're chatting, I'm going to find a picture of Dark Claw because Dark Claw is freaking cool.
I can't find it, but I've got a copy somewhere down here of the Batman Spawn crossover, but I can't remember where it is. So.
Grumpy Old Dude wants to know: does Chris think Bobby Mack should run for any political office?
No. He should support. He should just sit back and support his best friend.
Hashtag Bobby Mack for PM.
Yeah, I'll let
I
Bobby Mack know.
There was a banner that ran across the bottom earlier in the stream about the Bigfoot stream for tomorrow.
Yes.
Does Bigfoot exist? Bobby, yes. Jay, no. That's not true.
Oh, well, now you've made a liar of me, haven't you?
But I am extremely skeptical about it.
There we go. There's a picture of the Dark Claw, half Batman, half Wolverine, Logan Wayne. Very just ridiculously cool.
I've not read that. I've heard a lot about that comic though.
Oh, it was really good.
It was cool.
Steve,
the one I need to get is Red Sun. Actually, that's the one I really is on my list to get.
Oh hell yeah, that is a cool read. That is a cool read.
Chris, Steve wants you. He says, check my last tweet for you.
Oh, I've seen this thing going around. I haven't actually watched it yet. I'll watch it. I know Steve's a big Trump supporter, so I know he'll just be pro.
Oh, come on.
The amounts of time that I think Steve wants to throw things at me when we do over and under. I can see it in him. He's just like going, no, man, no, you're not saying that. And half the time I do it with a little bit of a grin on my face, but it's no, look, I don't think he's I just don't see how anyone can ascend to the position of president of the United States and be dumb, because if it was something that dumb people could do, everyone would do it.
Steve says it's a screenshot.
Oh, okay. I have seen the video going around though. I'll suss it out. I'll definitely look at it. So make sure everyone tune into Over and Under. You can find out what I think. What else have we got? Haven't had a question from Gary tonight.
No. Well, Gary does have a.
Okay, I think
Ed wants to know if you'd ever bleach your butthole.
That's from Ed, is it? Of course,
yeah.
It's from Ed. you know what, Ed? I've never actually, I've never thought of it. Maybe if you can just sort of let me know how it worked out for you, and we'll talk about it sometime. And Amber, if you're watching, hit him again.
Oh, Gary says there is an ACOS report reference that shows poverty increasing over the last 25 years.
Cool. Send it to me. Well, we haven't only had conservative governments over the last 25 years. I will point that out. 25 years ago would have been, I think we were probably in Hawke Keating and then Howard Costello. Neither of them were bad governments. We saw growth. We've had Labor governments in between. Yeah, send me the stats. I'll look at them. I can't comment on things I haven't seen.
I don't have anything else at the moment.
We've had 40 years in like neoliberalism here, and one form or another anyway. So.
Oh, really quickly, last chance. If anyone's got a question they want to throw, I'm still here. We're just about to click the 2-hour mark, so I probably don't want to go really past that. But if anyone's got a question, now is your last opportunity. Throw it out there. Otherwise, I'm just going to start shilling and saying, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this channel if you're new here. Hit the like button. Hit the dislike button if you want. There's probably a couple of dislikes because, I mean,
No, right now there's zero.
Okay.
Oh, really? Wow.
I mean, this.
Cool.
I don't think this is a quick one. Then I don't necessarily know this is specific to you.
You don't do quick ones, Jeff. I know that. Yeah. So that's okay. Ask away.
Don't know. Yeah. Trying to think how to formulate this. In this atheist kind of community, how do we best go about having these kind of conversations with people we don't necessarily agree with, in your opinion?
Except the fact that you disagree. Sorry,
Jake? I can answer that one.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'll answer that one. It's really simple. Don't be a dick. It's pretty simple. You've got to take what somebody says. Just because you would disagree with it doesn't mean their opinion is invalid. And to automatically come into the conversation thinking what they have to say has no bearing or is invalid, you already lost the conversation. You've got to listen to what they say. You can disagree with them, but you can't automatically discount what they have to say before you even hear what they have to say. And that's what happens a lot of times is a lot of people, I've seen it in the atheist community, even in the flat earth community, where they will automatically, before the conversation starts, everything this person has to say is absolutely bullshit. They don't listen to what they have to say.
You can't do that. It's look, you know what? Hey, I'm a conservative in atheist Twitter, which is as progressive as fuck. Let's not kid ourselves. I disagree with a lot of people, so I've actually learnt to get a lot better at, I guess, understanding other points of view. I think what we've got to be able to do is be able to say, you know what, we can have a conversation about this, and at the end of it, we still might not agree, and that's okay. Sometimes that's just, it is what it is. You know, it is what it is. Yeah. I did see a question from Master Zenith there, but there's a few other questions. I'll let you. Incidentally, fun fact: Atheist Pastor is a huge Uni-Rock fan. I love Uni-Rock. He is so factual. He's where I go for all my facts, all my knowledge. Uni-Rock is wonderful. Uni-Rock good, Steve bad.
Chris, I know this is your channel, but why even bring that idiot up?
Hey, don't blame me. Blame McRae.
McRae,
blame Steve.
Blame Steve. I mean, everyone else blames Steve, so just blame Steve. It works. I mean, there's a whole community dedicated to blaming Steve.
This is just my opinion on that guy. He is not worth giving attention to. He's just
no. That's not fair to say. Steve's a good guy. You shouldn't say that about him, Jeff.
No. You know who I'm on about.
I can't believe it. That Steve, you heard it there. Jeff's giving you a hard time, Steve. Cancel him. Cancel him now. Incidentally, that reminds me, if you want to know how we can have atheists who are quiet and don't argue more often, we need more atheists like this guy.
Sorry.
Rocks don't disagree with you. They don't argue.
I've had a few arguments on Twitter about that in the last. I think I've just decided I'm going to step away from this and disengage from this one now. But
I think it's as funny as hell. It's I really, the train wreck that is. It's embarrassing. It's seriously embarrassing. There's a reason that I say to people don't want to identify as atheists because they see some of the shit that. And look, Twitter's not representative. I can assure you of that. But it's embarrassing. So Grumpy Old Dude wants to know if I've ever impregnated a sock. That's a very interesting question. I was a teenager once. I mean, we don't need to go into it though.
Did sock give birth?
Possibly. Master Zenith wants to know NRL or AFL. Well, I'm a massive Giants fan, but I'll do a reveal right here, right now. Go the Dragons. I'm born and bred on NRL. Yeah. I grew up going to Dragons games. I'll be at the Dragons game on Thursday night because we can go to sporting events here in Australia because we listen to our government's advice, except for Victoria. Just incidentally, America, it's when you listen to your government's advice, eventually things die down and you get to go to sporting events again. So, NRL. But I love AFL at the same time. I'm a huge GWS fan.
I'll just say, actually, just something Sammy said in the chat a second ago that I totally agree with. Yeah, Twitter can be an absolute cesspool. It probably isn't also the best medium to have a lot of these discussions on at times.
There's only so much you can fit into 140 words. And it's amazing how brave and strong people are when they're typing behind a keyboard.
A lot of nuance gets lost in a tweet.
Yeah. Like that Godless Cranium douchebag, a classic example of a keyboard hero. Sorry, I've got to get my one in per show after he had a go at Ed. So,
okay.
Anyway, what do we got next? What's next?
That's about it.
That's it. Cool. All right.
Well, wait a minute. No, I do. There was one. Gary again. Would Chris be willing to be critical of the current conservative government?
If they do something wrong, yeah. When Morrison was in Hawaii, I didn't think that was a good move. I understood it. Look, what you've got to remember, okay, so, and I'll give myself a disclaimer here. I'm a member of the Liberal Party. So to be a member, and, I was also a candidate at the last election, so obviously I believe in what that party stands for. Now, if they do the wrong thing, yeah, I've got no problems. I'm not that tribal, but in general, I'm probably going to agree with them a lot more than I'm going to disagree with them, just because we hold the same political values. But yeah, no, if they screw up, I'll call them out in it. In a very kind way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how well you'll be able to answer this, but I mean, I ask you, obviously, as a member of a political party, and I've been a member of a political party before, that to some degree you have to accept a certain level of party discipline on policies, I'm assuming.
As an individual member, no, I can speak out. Look, if I actively start campaigning against the party, well, then I'm probably going to get thrown out, but I probably shouldn't be in the party to start with. Look, as a candidate, certainly you follow the policies, and especially when you're a non-elected candidate, it's not necessarily your place to try and change the entire party policy from, the platform of I'm running to represent a certain area. I know when I ran, I wouldn't run for a party that I disagreed with. I quite strongly agree with the Liberal Party principles. That's why I ran as a candidate for them. Even though the reality was the seat that I ran in is one of the safest Labor seats in the country, and the chance of me winning it was none and zero. But still, I focused on a lot of the local issues because our local member here, to say she's useless would be to insult the useless. She didn't even bother campaigning. She's just quite literally just one of those hacks who basically got into the position, and she's a nice lady, don't get me wrong, but she's just basically got the position. She does nothing for the community compared to like others. I mean, our local state member, he's Labor. I think he does well. Politically, we disagree, but I think he's got the community's interests at heart. You know, I think he has a go for the community, and I respect that. We disagree on politics. I don't necessarily think he's effective, but you know, at least he's out there doing a job. Whereas I think, you know, the lady I ran against, she was just useless. So, but I've kind of lost my point because I was just bagging a political opponent. But look, ultimately, if you're a member of a political party and you don't agree with their values and policies and principles, then you probably shouldn't be in that political party. I don't necessarily agree with everything that the Liberal Party says or has done. Don't ask me for specifics because I don't have any off the top of my head, but I'm sure that, you know, it's not blind faith for me. No.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, probably wasn't the best phrase the way I phrased that question, to be honest, anyway. But I'll just say very quickly, because I've been in obviously political parties and trade unions or whatever, where it's been a bit more sort of democratic centralist kind of thing, where you can bring those arguments about what the official position is or whatever to a conference or a policy meeting, whatever. But once the vote's taken, you kind of all like, okay, like we're gonna go this way or that way. We voted to go this way. Even if I voted the other way, the majority gone that way. So you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
And look, there's disagreements within parties as well. I mean, you know, it's okay. Actually, I will give you an example. So, Liberal MP, a guy called Craig Kelly. I completely disagree with his stance on climate change, especially climate change policy. He's the next electorate over, so he's probably the closest Liberal MP I've got. I completely and I'll be outspoken in how much I disagree with him, and I think most of the party does as well. But he's an elected member of Parliament, and I'm not. So he's got a platform that I don't have. And how have we gone there? We've I think we're almost done. What's Gary said? Gary chose not to attack me over everything the government has done, and I appreciate. Look, I get, and this is one thing I'll say about Gary, and it was good to actually have Gary on the after show the other night, because you know it's me and Gary we've chatted a bit on Twitter. It was good to have a face to face. Me and Gary disagree probably on a lot of things, well, the majority of things political. Okay, and that's cool, but. And here's a lesson for the greater atheist community. Me and Gary can still have a civilized conversation. If I run into Gary, and you know it's every chance that one day I will, because we only probably live about an hour away from each other. Both being in New South Wales, there's not a lot of population centres, but the chances are, we'll sit down and have a beer and probably have a laugh and probably have a good time. So we disagree on politics. Doesn't mean I don't think he's a good guy. And I think that's a lesson. And you know what? Gary can he's thrown a lot of questions at me. I don't think that I've convinced Gary here to vote for the Liberal Party. And that's okay, because we need differences of opinion, especially in politics. We need different ideas. We need different thoughts. I think we need that conservative economic principles, but I think we also need a little bit of that progressive nature to come in and to help balance it out sometimes. I think there's room for both sides of politics. I think there's room to disagree. But ultimately, we all want what's best for the country. We all want what's best for society. It's my motivation is I want to make sure that the country that my kids grow up in and their kids gives them the best opportunity possible to live the most comfortable and enjoyable lives they can. That's my motivation personally. I love my community. I want to see my community. There's a lot of people who are forced to drive up to Sydney for work every day. I hate that, because that's an hour each way at a minimum, that there's people who are spending time away from their family, their kids, and that's also then money that's not getting spent in my town. So, I want to see businesses thrive in my area. That's sort of what drives me. So, but there's people who will disagree, and that's cool. Like, I don't want everyone to disagree with me. I want to have conversations with people, and sometimes I even want to change my mind. On Over and Under, two strange things have happened in the last 2 episodes. There was Steve brought up a good point. I changed my opinion and said, you know what, Steve, I think you're right on something. I agree with you. I thought something else. And then the same thing happened last episode. Steve, same thing. You know what? Actually, I think you've changed my mind. Cool. It doesn't happen all the time. It's nice when it does, but I think we need to challenge ourselves with other thoughts. I think if we live in a bubble, well, then we're never going to really be able to move ahead, are we? So anyway.
Chris, did you not get the memo? You can't challenge Steve on anything.
You can't agree
I
with
did,
him.
yes.
Agree with him.
Yes, no. Must argue with Steve. Must agree with Steve. Well, I am part of the McRae cult apparently now. So, they're going after. Even though I said to them, I don't want anything to do with this. It's just leave me out of all your. I should have known better because crazy people are crazy people, and they're just going to go. So I don't care. It's they can call me whatever, but we must. Yes, I am in the McRae cult now, so I agree with everything that Steve says. Steve is Lord and Master, and we mustn't forget that. And one of them will probably clip that and use it as evidence. That'll probably be on Unirock next week. So Unirock.
I can't do his voice, but I have proof here, and I'm going to show it in a minute that Steve is running a cult, and he'll clip that. Yeah, that's what that prick does.
He's admitted to it, and you can see Jay and Jeff, they're nodding in agreement. They're all hypnotized by Steve's magical mind powers. Oh dear. All right. Well, any other questions? Otherwise, we'll
nope, no more questions.
We'll call it. Cool. Well, that's been a bit of a fun chat. It was a lot more peaceful than I thought. I didn't get any Christians come in. I'm disappointed. I would have liked a few Christians because there's Christians are confused how I can be a conservative and an atheist. They don't get it, even though I'd almost go as far to say is, it's a 50-50 balance. Like it's, half, it's probably half conservative, half right, half left. Maybe not conservative, but you know what I mean. Cool. All right. Thanks for coming, everyone. It's been a good chat. We've just clicked over 2 hours. So thank you for all the questions. And look, if anyone's got any questions, if you want to understand conservative thought, conservative politics better, hit me up. I'm happy to have a conversation. Don't forget, Monday is going to be a lot of fun. I've got John Richards on. So that's going to be an interesting. He's had some fairly interesting conversations with people in the community. I probably have a little bit of a different approach. I don't probably. I have a bit of a different approach. I'm actually looking forward to having a conversation with him about a few things. But yeah, should be interesting. That'll be Monday, 9:30 Australian Eastern, which is 7:30 US Eastern, or 12:30 for those of you in the old motherland. So, sorry, just a bit of COVID there. Thank you, everyone. I'm safe. I've given it to everyone on the internet. Thanks everyone again for coming. Thanks for the questions. Like I said, anyone's got any questions, hit me up. That's cool. I'm happy to explain things. And if you're worried that I'm not going to agree with you, that's cool. Maybe I won't. Doesn't mean I'm going to be nasty to you. If you're nice and kind and everything to me, I'll be nice and kind and everything to you. So,
well, look, Chris has had me on his stream for the last 2 hours, and he knows he and I have very, very different political views. And
I don't think we're ever voting the same. Well, we're in different countries, but if we were in the same country, we wouldn't be voting the same way. Let's not kid ourselves. Yeah. But that's okay. We can still have this. We still have a dialogue, and we still get on. We watch footy together. I mean, it's like we watch the Dragons play terribly together.
And don't forget tomorrow, Bigfoot.
Oh, Bigfoot. So hang on. So we might get Bobby Mack and Jay might agree on the existence of Bigfoot. Now I'm really intrigued. Okay, so I was going to tune in anyway, but in case I wasn't going to tune in, I'm definitely going to tune in now. You need me for the show anyway.
Yeah.
But okay, Bigfoot. Let's see what happens when Bobby Mack and Jay agree on something. So cool. Have fun, everyone. Links for people's channels are below. I've got a list of people who I think everyone should follow down below. I've got a few more names to add to that, actually. But I know Jeff's definitely in there. Jay is definitely in there. Go like it, subscribe, and do all those kind of things to their channels. Hit me up on Twitter if you've got any questions, at atheist_pastor. Apart from that, wherever you are on this beautiful planet that we all occupy, good morning, good evening, good night, good day, good.